Zurich Film Festival. Conversations that celebrate cinema. 'Cause life is better with movies.
My name's Scott Roxborough. I'm the European Bureau Chief for the Hollywood Reporter, and it is my great pleasure to be able to speak tonight with Noah Baumbach, who this evening will be receiving the Tribute 2 Award from the Zurich Film Festival for his contribution to the history of cinema. And will also be presenting his new film, J. Kelly, which I hope some of you here in the audience will have the chance to see this evening. Mr. Baumbach's right here, so I'll bring him down in just a sec. Just want to give a very quick overview of his incredible career. I say he's getting a Tribute 2 Award this evening. And I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that he is the successor to the great humanist directors, people like Woody Allen, like Mike Nichols. He has, Mr. Baumbach, in his 13 films over the last 30 years, has found a way to tell, in some ways, very ordinary stories about ordinary catastrophes that happen to all of us in life, in relationships, in marriages, and intertwining them with a look at, I don't know, the big ideas of the world. What is the meaning of life? What are we here for? And one theme that goes through so much of his work: can art give form or maybe meaning to life? I won't go through all his incredible films in his career, but as with all artists, Mr. Baumbach has drawn from his own life and put it into his work. But he has always said, and I think that's something we'll be talking about tonight, that his work, while it is all very, very personal, none of it is actually autobiographical. Just a teaser for this evening with J. Kelly. If you haven't read about it, it is premiered in Venice. It is a film about a very Noah Baumbach-like character, a artist in the middle of a very personal crisis, played by George Clooney in a role that seems tailor-made for him. But what I find very interesting about this film is that in some ways, it seems a departure for Mr. Baumbach. It's one of the most purely delightful movies that I think he's ever made. And I think it's guaranteed to have a huge career, both in theaters, online with Netflix, as a Netflix film, as the last films from Mr. Baumbach have been, and of course, looking towards the Oscars. You can bet now that Adam Sandler is going to win next year for Best Supporting Actress. Put that money down now. That's my call. But let us get started. Please give a warm round of applause for Mr. Noah Baumbach.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, and thank you for that introduction.
Oh, of course. Can I start? This is because you're getting this award this evening, which is for your entire body of work. It forces me to go back and play therapist and go back to your childhood. You've obviously made a lot of films about families and about relationships. And it always is the thing that you have to go back. Okay, what did your parents do, and so forth. It is quite easy to do in your case because your parents were both writers, both film critics. I had to think of this because I spoke with Hildur Gundersdottir, the film composer, who's also getting an award here. Her family are all musicians, and she said she never thought of doing anything else. What was it like for you? Did you ever consider not going into the arts, not pursuing a life as a writer or as a filmmaker?
Well, I think I at some point I wanted to be a baseball player. But then I'd say pretty early on I wanted to. I had it in my mind that I'd like to make movies, but we didn't know anybody who made movies. We lived in Brooklyn, which at the time, if you know New York City, now Brooklyn is like Manhattan, but then it was then it was like Sacramento or something. It was like living far away, and Hollywood I'd never been to or had any, I'd never seen a script. I'd never, so I had it in my mind, and my parents were writers and creatives, so I wrote a lot, and I found myself writing a lot of dramatic things. I don't mean serious, but like with dialogue, and I would write plays, and then I would shoot movies with like early video cassette and edit it on 2 VCRs and do all but I sort of through the whole time thought, well, I feel like this, I really would like this to happen, but I don't even know, I don't know that anyone really does this. You know, the people who do it live in another universe entirely. So, you know, but I still pursued it at the same time.
And so what was your in, I guess, or was it a moment that you, was it a film that you saw that you said, this is something I'll have to do, that I can do this, or I need to pursue it? Or was it a person you met, or what?
It was really watching movies. I just felt like I loved movies so much. And my parents were fiction writers. My father wrote short stories and novels, and they really valued movies and liked movies. So I I saw movies all the time with them. And so I'd say at a certain point, I think I kind of just started to feel like I thought in terms of movies. So then in my regular life, I would think of things that happened as scenes in movies, or how could, if I was going to be if this would be a great scene in a movie, you know, people, you say that sometimes, and I would do that a lot, but I didn't know practically how to do it. I'd never been on a film set or anything, but I figured, well, I suppose that they tell you that later. You know, I just sort of felt like I understood what a movie was.
And so what was your entry point? Who was it? Someone who helped you in, or what did you to actually get into this industry, to get into this business?
Several things. I mean, you know, it's these things that you become narratives in retrospect. But when I was in college, and I had some friends, my roommates and then my housemates at the end of college. I went to Vassar College in Poughkeepsie, New York, and one of them was Jason Blum, who we were very close and still are. And Jason has Blumhouse and is a hugely successful producer and mogul. But at the time, I thought, like, well, when we graduate, why don't I write a movie and you guys will produce it? And so that's what we did, and we sent it to. We knew a lot of people we went to college with whose parents maybe had some entree into some. I don't know. I didn't know anybody, so we would just send it, and it would just go places and mostly go nowhere. But then sometimes we put together a packet. We had all these graphics. I mean, we put so much time into this thing, and none of that actually got the movie made, but it also did, because it's like the journey you take, the nose, that just the activity suddenly gives you momentum, even though, you know, in a lot of cases it's momentum that's sort of taking you nowhere. But we felt like we were making a movie, and we did meet people along the way, and people who would say, oh, actually, you know, well, my uncle once invested in a movie and send a script, and we go have a meeting with that person. And then it ended up getting made after several stops and starts by a company called Trimark, which was a home video company, and they had made the Leprechaun movies. So you can see why they thought of me. But I think they wanted to get into sort of art house. They thought they did. They didn't. I don't know that they actually did. Because when they saw the movie I made them, they were like, no. But I ended up, and then that fell through, and then I had to end up writing a part for Eric Stoltz, the actor, to get the money, and I just added a character to the movie with like the last minute. And that was my first movie. It was called Kicking and Screaming, and that was you know, and I thought, oh God, I've been at this for ages, but you know, I was 25 years old. You know, I thought like, oh, you know, finally. But you know, it's crazy. I look back at it; it's like it happened quickly.
Yeah, I mean, you made that movie, got a little bit of attention from there, and you made at least two others. I think there's another Eric Stoltz film, which I'm forgetting.
I made a movie called Mr. Jealousy.
Right, Mr. Jealousy,
yeah. and then I kind of went into the weeds for a while, and that was sort of I sort of have two beginnings of my career. It was sort of like I made these movies in my 20s, and then I had trouble getting my third movie made, and it kind of put me in a. I mean, it's a story I tell a lot to people when they sort of talk about like struggling and think, because I did really feel like I thought in a way maybe my career's over before it started. When Greta and I wrote Frances Ha, I was thinking a lot about that time, because she's in the movie as a dancer who is, you know, dancing, but it's not going to happen for her in the big way. So then what is the other way, you know? And I thought, well, maybe that's, you know, what am I, you know, I sort of had like my dream come true, and then I was like, but maybe it's not coming true. And it put me, you know, it was about 8 years between Mr. Jealousy and then, but during that period, I wrote The Squid and the Whale, and it kind of, I think the struggle allowed me to find a voice and to find my voice as the kind of filmmaker that I sort of was but didn't know yet. And that was kind of, you know, retrospectively profound for me, because it was I don't know if that would have happened if I had, say, if my second movie had been more successful, or, you know, it was, because everything about that movie, writing it, then it took a long time to get made. And then even the making of it was kind of, 23 days or something, which was even less than I'd had on my first movie, which I think was 24 days. And it was like a fever dream of filmmaking. But I also was like ready for it to happen then. And I was, you know, I was in my 30s now, and I was more, I was kind of ready to really start in a way that I probably wasn't 10 years previous.
And I mean, obviously a very personal story, because it's directly inspired by your experiences watching your parents get divorced, and your feelings as a child watching that happen. There's been a lot of connections that people make between your autobiography and your film stories. As I mentioned at the top, you say you don't make autobiography, but you make personal stories on autobiography. Can you dig into that a little bit? What do you mean by that? And what do, I don't know, critics or people in the audience miss if they try to view your work just through like the lens of autobiography?
I mean, I understand people looking at things and thinking, oh, like I probably do it too. I mean, I have done it, where it's like you see something that feels very personal and alive, and you want it to be true in a way, you know, and it feels true for you watching it, so you want it to be true for the person who made it. And then and so I it's not that there's anything wrong with it. It's just when I have to talk about it, because then it's like I use autobiographical elements all the time, but like I was just saying about Frances Ha, but it's like you watch Frances Ha, you don't think, oh, that was my life in my 20s, but it really was. I mean, it was she has a line about, I mean, it was Greta's too very much, but it was, you know, he says, what do you do? And she says, I don't really do it yet, you know, and that's how I felt in my 20s. Or she says, it's hard to explain. She said, because I don't really do it yet. And The Squid and the Whale was more taken from my life growing up, because I shot it in Park Slope where I grew up, and I used a lot of elements from my life. But those are the things that then help inspire, create, you know, imagination and things, so that the movie can become what the movie is going to be. And so, you know, there are things that you can draw lines to, but it doesn't really have anything to do with how the movie works. The movie is a story, and a story that I made up, that uses things that I know or remember, or things that happen to friends of mine, or and, you know, I mean, it's sort of the pleasure of making something doing of creativity is that you kind of can draw from everywhere, and it's I feel like it's something Mike Nichols had written me a letter when he saw the Squid and the Whale, and he said it reminded me of why I got into the film business, which is revenge. and I know what he means. I mean, I think I know what he means. I felt like it's not revenge on a person. It's not. I don't see it as a bad revenge. It's like taking things from your life that at the time you're at their mercy because it's your life. You have to go through these experiences, and then later saying like, how can I make this something beautiful? How can I make this something relatable for other people? How can I express this in a way? And often I'll have people will tell me stories from their lives, friends of mine, like in the Squid and the Whale, with the kid, Jesse Eisenberg's character pretends that he wrote this Pink Floyd song, but that was a friend of mine had done that, who I knew in college, who I'm still very close to, and he had told me the story. It wasn't a Pink Floyd song, but it was, and I felt like I totally know, like I could have done that in some other version of myself. So it works perfectly in this story. I felt like it was a great way. It was cinematic because he could perform it. It was music. It was, he could, and so but that's a kind of great example of something that I actually feel as true. That story is as true about me as anything else I've put in my movies, except it didn't happen to me.
Is that a form of comfort for you as well? If you go through difficult things in your life that I can form this into a movie. This could be a scene in one of my films.
Absolutely. Yeah. If you go through a divorce, it's like anything that happens. It's you're like, once you get over the sort of pain of it, or at least somewhere in the midst of the pain, you think like, I got it. Hopefully, I can put this in something. And then sometimes it comes, I'll be like, now that I'm old enough to have, things repeat, it's like, or I'll be like, oh, it's too bad I've already put this in a movie.
I had to think what you say about autobiography, personal autobiography, and I fully understand the idea and how annoying it must be for people to always ask, "Oh, is this real? Is this real?" and whatever. But I had to think, watching Jay Kelly, that part of the whole fun of that movie, and it's maybe a funner movie in some ways than some of your other works, which are a bit darker, that the part of the fun of that movie is the expectation of the audience. Because if you haven't seen it, it's George Clooney playing a very George Clooney-like character, and a lot of the things in the film seem to directly line up with facts that we know about George Clooney. Part of the fun of that movie is people believing in the audience, or at least pretending to believe, we're really watching George Clooney in private, in person. I mean, I'm sure that must have been the idea in making it. But take a step back. When did that start? When did that project start? How did that come about? And the idea to do a George Clooney movie about George Clooney with George Clooney.
Well, it's not about George Clooney. It's George Clooney is playing a movie star. So, and it was sort of built into the, I think. At a certain point when Emily Mortimer and I were writing it, we kind of knew that a movie star needed to play the movie star because the audience needed to feel a history with the character they're watching in a way that the people in the movie feel with the character, and that it wouldn't feel the same way if it wasn't that. And so that was sort of fairly early on. It just felt like the right thing to be. And then that George seemed like a great one to do it because he, I also think George feels like he could be a movie star in any time period. He's there's something kind of timeless about him. And so it's, by design, there's a kind of melding of it. But that's true really of when you cast any movie star in a part, that whether they're playing a movie star or not, that the audience has a relationship with the actor. That's the pleasure we have from movie stars. And we find we love watching them. They're both a kind of wish fulfillment for us, but they're also a they're a point of identification. You know, it's like we recognize this person, so we feel comfortable watching Jimmy Stewart in a movie, or Cary Grant, or George Clooney, or Tom Cruise, or whoever it might be, and Robert Redford, Paul Newman, and so in a way, this sort of interesting thing was like, because in a way, it's a story of a person who starts as a movie star and ends as a human being. And so watching the movie was sort of, I thought, could be an experience of seeing the same way we identify and movie stars become our avatars. We can, that identification could actually then start to turn back, and now he's playing us. And so I thought that I mean, I didn't actually think that while writing it. I was just writing what seemed compelling and fun and interesting to me. But I think as we got further with it, that seemed to be something that the movie was telling us it wanted.
And as I said before, it's probably one of the most joyous films. I mean, there is a bit of darkness in it, but it's incredibly entertaining, incredibly funny. Is that just a reflection of, I don't know, where you are at the moment, or does that come more from Emily's Mortimer's side of bringing in? Where did that element come in? Because I think it does stand out in a lot of ways of your work and being truly, I would say, joyous.
Well, I think it was what we were, as we were doing it, it felt like, I mean, in the movie, people have seen it, but it's he's sort of on a kind of, he sort of has a crisis early on in the movie, and he's sort of on this journey, but the journey is kind of fueled by a kind of excitable, somewhat manic energy. And, it's essentially like you're trying to watch someone outrun himself. And he's quite good at it, because he's very charming, and he's got a lot of people to enable him and keep him protected from the world. But as he gets out in the world, you see in the movie, he has both sort of his past sort of starts to come to him, but also the world starts to expand for him, as he goes into Europe. And so I felt like, well, he's kind of forced to meet and re-meet himself as he goes through this thing. And I think that his energy and his sort of charisma makes it for a joyous experience. I mean, it's, I love sort of 30s and 40s comedies and, movies that have lots of characters and people talking all the time and talking over each other. And, there's such a pleasure to, a Howard Hawks movie, or a Preston Sturges movie, a Ernst Lubitsch movie, George Cukor. I mean, it goes on and on. Leo McCarey. I mean, like those, and you kind of want to live in those movies, and that was sort of, I think, again, as we were working on it, I felt like that's what this wants. It's like you want to be on the train with these people. You want to be in this group. You want to be in there, even though at the same time there's this kind of undertow of melancholy that's kind of seeping in as you go, and ultimately he has to face that too. But that's also part of what we love about movies too, is having an emotional experience, having something that feels cathartic emotionally. And I think there was sort of an opportunity as we were going for the story to turn that way.
And can I ask, because one thing I've always admired, you talked about the very early films, I think in Kicking and Screaming, your writer's voice, maybe the form hasn't quite got to the place that you want it to be, but in terms of the dialogue particularly, you've always had an incredible ear for dialogue, to have natural sounding dialogue. Where does that come from? Where do you, how do you, is it, is it something you work over again and again and again? Is it something you just pick up easily and, reproduce what you've heard? Because even from the very beginning, you seem to absolutely know how people talk and to express it in a way that's not theatrical or artificial.
Yeah, I think it's just something I've always kind of heard. I hear it in my head, and then I also hear it when other people are talking. And so if I like write something down other people are saying, I can, it's like, I don't know, I guess it's like having an ear for music in some way, if like, which I don't have. But I do have it in this way of it's always been the sort of the easiest thing for me to do, which is sort of sit down and just write people talking, and I enjoy it. And so I did a lot of improvisation in college and out of college, and in a way it's like that. You're kind of talking to yourself, you're just kind of coming up with, in some cases, funny things to say or something like that. But the thing is, I think I'm glad it feels that way, because actually the dialogue that I write is actually, it approximates a kind of naturalism, but it's actually quite, it's quite artificial. It just feels natural. Like if you actually break it down, and sometimes I might push it a little way, so it sort of actually starts to feel a little more artificial, or play it so it's even more naturalistic. It's like, it's like sort of playing music in a way of like where you want to take it. But often I will write conversations that help me understand the characters. So like when I'm writing a character, the dialogue will help inform me, okay, actually maybe that's who this person is now. So I like that they said that. Well, somebody who says that would do something different than what I'm having them do. So, okay, so now I've got to rewrite this now, because I think this is more, I think I found it here. So now I've got to rewrite the whole first part of the scene. And I have my, the way I work with the actors is, they do the script as it's written, because it actually helps me direct them as well, because I hear it in my head. So when they're doing the dialogue, I can kind of tell when it's right, because it sort of sounds like the song in a way. And it doesn't mean that I know exactly how they're going to do it. They might do it differently than I anticipated, but it's still the song, and it's a way that I can, and it helps me then even direct them. Like it often, if I find like I don't, something's not working, I realize that the actor has like 2 lines inverted or something, and that's what's throwing me off.
So the tone's off. Well, can I ask then, because you're also known for doing a lot of takes. How does that fit together? The fact that you have a very clear idea and your script is locked, and even every comma is in place, but you want to do take over take and take again. How does that fit together? What do you get from doing many takes of your script?
It sounds more rigid than it is, because I actually think, there's a pretty durable history of theatrical drama and comedy where people just do the lines. I don't know when improving on set became a thing, but some people work with improvisation brilliantly in their movies. I think they have, it's like we have this base, and then now they're going to bring all their humanity and all their individuality and all the reasons I hired these amazing people. They're going to do it in this whole other way. But we have a base of sort of dialogue. What I often do a lot of takes for a few reasons. One is I often do long takes with moving camera and a lot of choreography with the actors. And often we'll spend a lot of the morning choreographing and rehearsing the camera and getting everything. But even doing that, once we get going, new things always happen. And it's hard to get everything going at a certain point. So once things start to click, then it's often maybe we've done a few takes already. But also I find the actors find so much. It's not true in every scene, but in many scenes, they find so many different things, and an actor will do something that gives me an idea to do another take. A lot of times it's not me saying, oh, I'm going to do another. It's the actor doing something that gives me the note. I mean, that's when it's working great, and when you work with really great people, because they'll do something. It'll be some kind of thing, and I'd be like, oh, that's actually what the scene's about, or that's what that moment is, or that's what that moment could be. So let's now do that. Now I'm ready for it. So that, and we keep going. And other times the actors will say, like, I think now I have something, and so, I mean, that's why we do it. I mean, I also think, like, we're there. We love this. We're also lucky to be doing it. We all love doing it. I dreamt of doing this. Let's explore the hell out of it. Where else do we want to be? I'm always surprised when people in movies are like, like waiting to get home. I'm like, why don't we? Let's make the most of this.
Well, so is that a personal, again, this isn't a spoiler at all for Jay Kelly, but there is a recurring joke in Jay Kelly that George Clooney, playing as Jay Kelly, is always wanting to do one more take and saying, I think I've got something here. I think I have an idea. And then it's like, no, we're fine. We've got it. Was that a personal joke for you? And also was it for George? Because I assume George isn't used to doing as many takes.
Yeah, George told me from the beginning, he's like, I'm not going to do, he's like, I'm too old. I can't do all the takes. He's like, you don't want more takes from me. I've got 3 in me. And then he just did everything I asked. Yeah, well, it was it's something certainly that is, something that comes up with actors when you're doing that. And also I think it played into this, sort of broader theme of the movie, which is sort of, realizing at a certain point in your life that this is the one time, and these are the choices I made, and this is the way it's going. And 20 years ago, I may have told myself, oh, I'm just going to do this, I'll get back to that, or whatever, whatever it is. And 20 years later, you're like, I never got back to that. And if now when, if not now when, and so, I felt like that line also resonated, just in terms of what we're all going through on this planet.
Yeah. Well, yeah. To make it, yeah, a really big picture. Actually, I put a pin in that because I want to come back to that. But the want to ask, because you wrote this film with someone else, with Laura. You've written a number of films with your partner, with Greta Gerwig. You and Wes Anderson have done a couple of films together, written together. What do you gain from that sort of collaboration, and what have other writers taught you? I mean, what have you learned from writing with Greta, from writing with Wes?
Well, when I wrote with Wes, it was quite some time ago, and I was trying to get the Squid and the Whale made, and he was being helpful with that, and he was like, asked me if I wanted to write The Life Aquatic with him, and so what I learned, I mean, you learn so much. I mean, it in all cases, they're people that I are friends of friends, or I feel very close to, either wives or friends, or and or both, and so that the collaboration is an extension of the relationship in some way, and but I mean, like, what I'll just say in terms of like specifics, like Wes at the time would just pour over things and go so sort of methodically through things, and I think I learned at the time from him, because I think I felt, because I'd been trying to get movies made, and I was sort of like, I felt a little bit like in a rush, and I was sort of like, like I was as a kid. I would like go write a story, you write it, give it to your parents, and like, what do you think, and then, okay, I'll write another one, and you're just like doing it all the time. And I think I really sort of, he this sort of thing of like, this is, when people read this is this is going to be the first time they read it, and you want the best version of this thing, you don't want to wait for later to get it, so of really like questioning and getting things right. I was really impressed by him. I mean, I think of how he did it, and so I mean, I think with Greta and I mean with Emily and Greta, it's with all of them, but I mean with Emily and Greta, it's like it becomes hard at a certain point even to know who's doing what. You know, you think. I mean, I've taken credit for things she wrote. She's taking credit for things I wrote. I think I say that meaning we don't know who wrote them, you know, but I'm sure that's happened, you know, like, that's what's so great about it. Because you find, I mean, the thing I would say about collaborating is that, like, with Emily, with Greta, is that with Wes, it's like I like myself when I'm with them. So like I feel like I'm the best version of myself, and you know, so they're bringing all the stuff that is so wonderful and unique and beautiful that they do, and then also I feel like I'm, you know, it's like, you know, people say I guess you hit with a better tennis player, you're you know, you're better. You know, I found myself kind of, you know, just like, you know, I don't know, you just find yourself sort of like inspired, and you know, and you can do that when you're by yourself, but it's you can often, when you're by yourself, it's like you get inspired anything and then you just talk yourself out of it, and you're like, you know, but you know, it's nice then to have somebody else say, like Emily would have a way where I'd look at her and she'd say, I'd go on some riff or whatever, and then I'd think like, this is like ridiculous, and then she'd go on, and so I'd be like, okay, maybe it's not so bad, maybe it's good.
Ask what you said before about the fact that this is the character Jay Kelly, that he's looking back at his life and realizing, well, maybe I don't have, you know, all the options open to me anymore. Maybe I have to make peace with what I've done, decisions I've made, and what I still have able to do. When you look at yourself in this case, in terms of your career, particularly, I don't need any personal details, but in terms of your career, what is it that you still want to do, or that you still think you have in you, that you know, maybe you haven't done yet, or that you would like to return to, or even just something maybe completely new that you haven't done film-wise? What do you still have in the tank, so to speak?
Well, I don't know that I think of it quite in that way. And that I think what I end up, usually when I'm finishing a movie, I start to, you know, in the editing and then the mixing, and I'll start that some other thing that I've had with me that I've thought about. I mean, often it's something I've, you know, like I was saying earlier, something where I'd love to do a movie like that, or with that, or, you know, whatever it is, or about that kind of character. It could be a character, a time, a thing. That will sort of start to make its way into my, like, it's like I start to feel ready for that one in a way that I just knew I wasn't before. And, you know, it happened, I mean, it's happened on almost all of them. And except for Marriage Story, I felt like that was like the one time I felt like I didn't know for the first time in a while what I wanted to do next. And so it's like they sort of announce themselves in some way, but I don't even know what they are yet. They're just like abstractions. I mean, there's specifics in there, but the movies are abstractions. It's like I just feel like I know if I could make that movie and do it well, I'd love, like, that would be that I'd like to make that movie. I'd like to see that movie, and then, you know, I don't know, whatever it is, you know, a year later, I have something that in some ways might have very little to do with the beginning part, but it has something to do with it. It's like, it's the journey that got me there, or in some cases it might have a lot to do with what I started with, and that just becomes the next movie, which is to say that's just how I've been doing it. So I don't think about it in like you know, in terms of like even in relationship to each other, like, or as a, we can look back and say, I can even look back and say like, okay, I see now when I made Frances Ha where I was then, and I understand better why I made that movie and how I made it. And but at the time I was just, I wanted to write with Greta, and I thought I wanted to write this part for her, and I just thought like this would be something that would be do it in black and white. This would be a movie I'd really like to do. And so yeah, I don't look at it like it's just that the stories that I have sort of stored up or stories that arrive that I didn't see coming.
So you're still not looking forward and looking and say, oh gosh, how many years do I have left? How many films do I have left in me? I've got to make 1 or 2 or these 6 or 7 or 12 or 14 before I finish.
No, I don't have a number or I've been lucky that I've gotten to make everything. Like, I mean, since The Squid and the Whale, every movie I've written, the next movie I've written, I've gone and made. And that's a real privilege. And some of those movies I don't watch them again. So I my guess is some of those movies, if I had that idea now, I wouldn't do it. But I'm glad I made it then. It's like it's an alternate history that I have out there. So the only thing is that there are sort of things or stories and things and characters and stuff that I keep thinking like, oh, I'd like to do a movie like that, or I'd like to do something that about that time or that thing, which haven't, that I haven't found. They haven't it's like I think of them as like wires, and like suddenly this wire's alive, and I can see it now. I can see the movie, and the others aren't yet, but I just trust that they'll be activated at some point.
That electricity won't go out. Yeah. We have a few minutes for a couple of questions from the floor. I think we also have some microphones. If I can barely see, but I'll duck down below the lights here. Get some here. We've got over here, and do we have the microphones here on the floor? Oh, yes, coming down. So actually, there we go. Perfect. Okay, so someone over here and in the middle here as well. First, maybe pass the mic all the way down, and then we can pass back up.
Sure, all the way back.
Yes, and put his hand up first. I think at least I spotted him first.
You can also do it without a mic.
Yes, you can speak. Yeah, speak. I'll just speak.
So okay.
But now you have the mic, so yeah.
So Jay Kelly is a part of this grand tradition of behind the scenes in Hollywood and existential crisis and so on. And while watching it, I was kind of reminded of many other movies like The Player and Wild Strawberries, Deconstructing Harry. When you go to Italy, it becomes Antonioni and Fellini. I'm very curious hearing what were your influences and inspirations for Jay Kelly.
Pretty much those ones. Well, you left out Sullivan's Travels. Have you seen that? The Preston Sturges movie. I think I understand why filmmakers make those movies, because it is a way to sort of express something using your own job as a way to, Day for Night, is another one. So, there's several of them, all that jazz. But I was also thinking, like I was saying, about sort of, like the screwball comedies, sort of American screwball comedies, like, Howard Hawks. He didn't make a movie specifically in that genre you're talking about, but and Ernst Lubitsch, definitely. But I think a lot about like Joseph Mankiewicz, who made All About Eve and Letter to Three Wives, and Mike Nichols, and Peter Bogdanovich, and Sidney Pollack, and people Hal Ashby, who Paul Mazursky. I think people who worked in this sort of, I suppose I don't know what you call it, but like a kind of humanist cinema of some kind. I mean, those are movies and filmmakers who I sort of look at, all the time in my life, and this one, of course, I was sort of thinking of the sort of tradition of, many of the movies you mentioned, but once we started going with it, it's sort of like those things are just sort of with me anyway. I didn't necessarily look at them again I might look at something like, Wild Strawberries to think about his memories and when he goes back to his childhood, like how, like specifically, like I remember how it was done, but then I'd be like, well, what did he do? How many times is he in it, as an older person versus, things like that to become about methodology and how you want to kind of, how you want to do something practically in a movie. But I certainly love all those movies.
So here and then maybe, I think right next to you was the man right beside. Right?
I have a question. I'm not working in the film distribution, but a lot of movie theaters struggle to find an audience here in Europe. And how or the possibilities of the big streaming studios like Netflix and Paramount influenced independent filmmaking or your work in America? Also, how has it been influencing your work?
Well, I imagine it's the same everywhere. Yeah, I mean, I like you and anyone love seeing movies in the theater, and it's a different experience. I don't know that I think we have to go and blame the internet ultimately. But I think it is why it's so important to support the theaters that are there. I mean, I think what happens a lot is I'll have this conversation with people, and then you ask somebody when was the last time they saw a movie in the theater, and it's like they can't, well, 6 months ago, and you're like, well, we've got to do a better job. We have to go, and so, but I think it's, I think they can live happily together. I mean, I have to believe that.
And this over here, and Jay Kelly's also getting a proper theatrical release, right? Yes. Before it goes out on Netflix, right?
You mentioned before that when you write dialogue, you have it in your mind, and you also love long takes. Is that also related to one another? Because if you edit a scene, you edit kind of the song, the dialogue in your head. And if you have a long scene, then maybe it stays more the dialogue that you have in your head. Is there a connection between that?
Well, I think it can be several things depending on the scene, but sometimes. I just like seeing bodies move through space and talking. And a lot of times the dialogue isn't even meant to be primary. It's just almost like it's background. It's like, it's people say 5 things, but really it's the 6th thing that you really need to hear or that matters, and so, but I also like it for the actors because the actors then get to play it in real time often, there's some scenes that, that I'll do that by design are more cut, but I like, it goes to some of the movies we were talking about, this sort of, if you've seen movies like His Girl Friday, where they're walking through the off, like just that flow of, and seeing people move and talk. I mean, when I was younger, I think I sort of thought about it a lot because I was thinking like, this is just going to be boring. Everyone's talking and sitting around in chairs, like let's get them up on their feet. But I actually feel like what I've discovered is that and I think I've written towards this as I keep going, is that the movement actually helps the actors, not just the right movement, actually helps give the words meaning, and it helps them understand when to throw something away and when not to. So they can say a line off camera, and that's fine. They don't need to be on camera saying it. They could go in the other room and say it. They can come back in and I find that beautiful, that kind of way, both the sound of it and also the visual of it. But from a practical standpoint, it's sort of, can be for many different reasons.
think we have time for one more question. If you're in front here.
When you write, do you sometimes experience writer's block or something like lack of inspiration? And if so, how do you deal with that?
Lack of inspiration, yeah, lots. Yeah, I mean, I think you kind of have to accept that. I mean, it's really why going and doing it all the time is so important. It's like exercise. Like some days you feel like, God, like this is so, I feel so good. This was like, and then other days you're like, I can't move, and writing is the same thing. It's like some days I'll feel like it's all kind of, I'm discovering things, it's clicking, and other days it's just like, okay, I'm just going to write this scene as badly as just let me just get it done and know that I'll come back to it and rewrite it later. But you have to allow yourself, and it's hard. You have to allow yourself to be kind of bad a lot of the time. A friend of mine who's a writer said, they asked how long it took for her, she was a short story writer, to write a short story. And she says, well, it's, X amount of time to write the story, and then about 3 times as long to take all the cliches out, And I think it's sort of allowing that, that this is your time. No one has to look at it till you're ready. And it's like, let's try not to be as self-critical as, don't throw this out before you give it a chance, and allow yourself to just, or just do something that's totally stream of consciousness, and maybe it's nothing to do. Go write something else, and then go back. Sometimes it's good to procrastinate by writing another thing, and then that helps you kind of re-fall in love with what you're working on.
Actually, I think that's a great place to stop, with a bit of inspiration for people to write badly until you can write well. Okay, well, thank you. Please have applause for Mr. Noah Baumbach.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right.